Welcome to Betrayal Narrative X.
When exactly everything went downhill, I couldn't say for sure. These things don't happen in a moment. They accumulate. They permeate everyday life. They become something habitual. Only later, in hindsight, do you put together a puzzle from scraps of memories and realize that everything was obvious. You just didn't want to see it. I thought Lauren and I were just going through a cooling-off period. Everyone goes through tough times, with the pressures of life and work, and no one stays young and passionate forever. We'd been together for 10 years, since I turned 25. I believe that the most important thing in marriage is patience and understanding, mutual support. But lately I felt like I was giving more than I was getting. Lauren had become different. Not in terms of looks, she'd always taken care of herself, but now she didn't seem to be doing it for me. A new hairstyle, a new style of clothing more revealing than before, a perfume I hadn't smelled before, the phone always near screen down, messenger messages longer, and our conversation shorter. I try to justify her behavior. She's tired. She's stressed. Maybe it's just a midlife crisis or something else she doesn't want to talk about. But the excuses kept me on my toes. "You've become a bit obsessive, Michael," she said one night when I asked her why she was working late again. "You realize I don't have to account for every minute, don't you?" "Of course you don't have to," I replied. "But you used to want to tell me how your day was." She shrugged and retreated to her bedroom without continuing the conversation. More and more often I caught myself that we didn't just talk less often. We lived as if we were strangers, sharing the same living space. She became cold, distant, irritable. She wasn't happy with everything I did. The way I put plates in the dishwasher. The way I buy the wrong brand of coffee. The way I asked her who she was spending time with. I didn't want to admit it, but there was a smell of treason in the air. The first alarm bells were muted, but then they got louder and louder. On weekends, she started finding excuses to go somewhere alone. We used to always go grocery shopping together, plan evenings out, but now she was always needing to be alone. One night I woke up to find her not in bed. Getting out of bed, I walked to the living room and saw the dim light of her phone screen. She was sitting on the couch, not noticing me. "Lauren?" I called out. "What are you doing?" she asked, smiling strangely. "Can't sleep?" "I was just texting a friend," she answered and got up almost immediately. "Go to sleep, okay?" She left for the bedroom, and I was left in the dark, staring at her phone, which she clutched to her as if guarding a secret. But the most painful part wasn't even her behavior. It was the realization that I was losing her, and there was nothing I could do. Then the worst happened. I lost my job. I was made redundant in a company I had worked for 7 years. It was a blow. I had always been proud of my career, my status, my stability. Lauren found out that evening at dinner. "So you're unemployed now," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not my fault. The company's laying people off. I'll be compensated, and I'll find something new." "Uh-huh. You know how many people are unemployed right now?" I didn't expect such a reaction. Even if she didn't care, at least she could have said something encouraging out of politeness. But she just shrugged, finished her salad, and left. I was desperate, without a job, in a marriage that was falling apart, and with a sense of utter helplessness. I blamed myself. I thought I was boring, uninteresting, a failure. I thought if I'd been better, Lauren wouldn't have gone cold on me. My birthday has always been an important day for me. Not because I liked attention or presents, but because it was a rare occasion to gather with loved ones and feel that someone cared. I was turning 35 this year, and despite all the recent setbacks, I was still hoping for a little celebration. Lauren told me that she had made a reservation at a restaurant, and that she had a little surprise for me. I was trying not to make any illusions, but in my heart I hoped that this evening would somehow change our situation. Maybe she, too, felt that there was a gap between us and wanted to close it. Maybe this dinner was her way of saying there was still a chance. When I arrived at the restaurant, she was already sitting at a table by the window. Perfectly styled hair, black dress, red lipstick. She looked like she was going on a date, not to dinner with her husband. "You look amazing today," I said, sitting down across from her. "Thank you, Michael. Let's just cut to the chase, okay?" Her tone was too cold, too formal, as if she were negotiating rather than wishing her husband a happy birthday. "What business?" I frowned, not sure what she was talking about. Lauren pulled a white envelope out of her purse and placed it in front of me. "Happy birthday," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. I took the envelope, not yet realizing what was inside, but something inside me was already clenching. "What's that?" "Just open it." I tore open the top of the envelope and pulled out the contents. The first thing I saw was the divorce papers. Everything was already signed on Lauren's side. I flipped through the papers, trying to find some explanation, but the only thing that fell on the table was a small photograph. I didn't want to look at it. I already knew what was in there, but my eyes focused on the image itself. Lauren, in bed, with another man. I didn't immediately realize that I was breathing too hard, as if the air in the room had suddenly disappeared. What the hell is this shit? My voice was hoarse, like I'd had a bottle of whiskey before this conversation. This is my gift to you, Lauren said, tilting her head to the side. You are now officially free. Are you serious? Absolutely. I looked at her and didn't understand how the person I'd loved for 10 years could sit across from me with that expression on her face, no shadow of regret, no drop of remorse. How long has this been going on? I asked, clutching the papers so hard my fingers turned white. What does it matter now? She shrugged. Answer me. About a year, she said, as if she were talking about something ordinary. And no, you couldn't change anything. It would have happened anyway. I couldn't understand why she was so calm. Shouldn't she be ashamed? Shouldn't she at least try to explain? Why is that? Why today? Because I wanted you to remember this day, she sighed, tucking her hair behind her ear. You've been dead inside for a long time anyway, Michael. Weren't you? I looked at her and suddenly realized that a complete stranger was sitting in front of me. I wanted to say something that would hurt her the way she'd hurt me. But the only thing I could do was stand up silently from the table. Michael, she called to me as I turned around, but I didn't even look in her direction. I walked out of the restaurant, not knowing where to go. It was drizzling outside. Cars were passing by. People were laughing, talking. Someone was making out at the entrance to the neighborhood bar. For everyone else, it was just a normal evening. And for me, the end of the life I knew. I wandered down the sidewalk, not noticing the drops running down my face, until I was in some park. I sat down on the bench, clutched my head with my hands, and tried to process what had just happened. She'd been cheating on me for a year. I was so stupid that I didn't notice anything. I blamed myself, thought the problem was me, looked for reasons in work, in stress, in everyday life. And all this time she was just preparing for her departure. I remembered the times when she seemed annoyed with me. I remembered her saying that I was too clingy. I remember closing the phone, staying out late, smiling at someone in her texts. It was all so obvious. And I was an idiot. I don't remember getting home that night. The last thing I remember is sitting on a bench, clutching the divorce papers and that damn photograph. Then it all blended into a drunken cacophony of footsteps, street noise, and a resounding emptiness in my head. My birthday. She chose the exact moment to trample everything we had. Or maybe I just thought there was something left. I thought we were going through a rough patch, and she was long gone. Physically, she was still here, but mentally and emotionally she was living a completely different life. I hadn't had a drink in a long time, but I saw no reason to hold back now. I opened the bar cabinet and pulled out a bottle of whiskey, poured a full glass, and drank it in one gulp, not even wincing. My throat burned, but it didn't feel any warmer inside, just emptiness. I tried to remember the moment Lauren had started to drift away, but I couldn't find a single point of reference. Maybe it had started long before I'd noticed. Little changes that I wrote off as stress, fatigue, household mishaps. Leaving, I guess, can also be gradual, step by step, until one day you find yourself on the other side of the abyss. I glanced again at the picture that lay on top of the paperwork. Lauren was with some man I didn't know. She was smiling, snuggled up to him, her face glowing with a pleasure I hadn't seen in a long time. The anger and pain coalesced into some kind of suffocating lump inside me. I clenched my fingers on the glass tumbler, feeling a wave of anger rise in my chest, but then I just tossed the picture back on the table. I grabbed my jacket and walked out into the street, not knowing where I was going. People were laughing, cars were whizzing by, and music was playing in the bars. I walked through the streets, not hurrying, just letting my legs move, not standing still. I walked into the corner bar where Lauren and I used to go. I sat down at the bar, ordered another whiskey, and stared at my reflection in the mirror behind the bartender. Tired face, faded eyes. 3 days unshaven, I looked just like I felt. Bad day, the bartender asked, placing a glass in front of me. I grinned, shaking my head. This is the worst. Days like this happen. Just not everyone finds out their wife is cheating on them with pictures attached. No ice then, he clarified, nodding at the glass. No ice. I mumbled and drained the whiskey again. The alcohol flowed through my veins, creating the illusion of warmth, but it didn't clear my head. I sat staring into the empty glass, trying to figure out what to do next. The next days passed in a kind of hazy state. I woke up late, drank coffee, but it didn't help me come to my senses. Lauren disappeared from the apartment, took her things, leaving only emptiness and the smell of her perfume lingering in the air. I tried to work on my resume, but I couldn't bring myself to focus. My mind kept going back to her. What is she doing right now? Where is she? Who is she with? Is she sleeping in his bed while I sit in this silence, cutting myself out of my life? I realized I was driving myself up the wall, but I couldn't stop. My phone was ringing with messages. Friends were calling, asking how I was, asking to meet, but I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just turned the sound off. A week went by when I suddenly realized I couldn't go on like this. I was sitting on the couch, staring into emptiness once again, when I suddenly realized that if I didn't start making changes, I would remain in this swamp. The first thing I did was remove everything that reminded me of her. Pictures, her things, even the stupid presents she'd given me on past birthdays. I boxed it all up and put it in the closet. Then I sat down at my laptop and opened a few job search websites. I couldn't afford to sit idle, staring into a past that no longer existed. Every movement was difficult, but I kept going. I sent out my first resumes, then a few more. I opened my notebook and started jotting down ideas for a project I had been putting off for a while. After all, I had experience, and just because Lauren had decided to cut me out of her life didn't mean I had to do the same to myself. I didn't want my life to end at this point. For the first time, I acted on automatic, not thinking about the future. I just followed simple rules. Get up in the morning, force myself to eat, send resumes, and don't let my thoughts slip back into the past. Laura no longer existed in my world, but her ghost still haunted me in detail. I'd find her hair on my pillow, notice the empty space in my closet, remember how she made her tea before bed. But I wasn't letting those things drive me into a corner anymore. Work was the first thing I focused on seriously. I spent a few days tidying up my resume, revisiting old contacts, and updating my LinkedIn profile. This helped at least temporarily keep my head busy, leaving no room for self-inflicted wounds. A week later, several companies had already responded to me, offering me interviews. One of them in particular caught my eye. The company was involved in IT startups, and they needed someone with my experience. I wasn't sure if I would succeed, but couldn't be any worse than it is now. The interview was scheduled for Friday at a downtown business center. I put on my best suit, checked my ID, and headed there, trying not to think about how long it had been since I last felt confident. The office was on the 15th floor, and as I rode the elevator, the thought flashed through my mind. What if things go wrong? I was used to stability, to the certainty of the future, and now I was back in the position of someone who was just trying to get back on his feet. But the interview went better than I expected. The project manager, a man in his 40s, got straight to the point. We talked about development strategy, market trends, and possible problems. I answered quickly, giving myself no time for doubts. You have an interesting perspective, he said at the end. We need people who are not afraid to take risks. When can you start? I blinked, not immediately realizing that I had just received an offer. Even tomorrow, I answered, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something inside shift in the right direction. In the evening of the same day, I went to a cafe not far from the office. I wanted to be among people, to feel the rhythm of the city that I had avoided for so long. I ordered a coffee, chose a table by the window, and opened my laptop to work on a few ideas. Excuse me, is this seat available? I looked up. A woman stood in front of me with a cup of latte in her hands. She had light brown hair, delicate features, and attentive brown eyes. Yes, of course, sit down, I replied, turning back to the documents. She sat down across from me, set down her cup, and pulled out her phone, but after a couple minutes, she was distracted by my notes. Are you working on something interesting? New project. Just got the job, so I'm working on it. Congratulations. She smiled and took a sip of her coffee. Change is a good thing. Sometimes change is just a necessity, not a choice. A difficult period? I looked at her calm but attentive expression. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like lying or dismissing it or pretending it was okay. Divorce, I said, trying not to let my voice give away too much emotion. Not the best way to start a new chapter, but I had no choice. There are situations when it's better to let go than to try to hold on. I didn't know what to answer, so I just took a sip of coffee. I apologize if I seem too nosy, she added. I'm Sophie, by the way. Michael. Nice to meet you, Michael. I hope things work out for you. I nodded, not knowing if I should continue the conversation, but Sophie was in no hurry to leave, and somehow it didn't bother me. The next day I went to work. A new office, new people, new tasks. Everything seemed unfamiliar, but at the same time it was exactly what I wanted. To break out of the old, to stop dwelling on what had long been lost. The team was friendly, the tasks were challenging but interesting. I immersed myself in my work, and for the first time in a long time I felt like I was living. And a couple days later, I got a text from Sophie. Sophie, how's the adjustment to the new place going? You looked very focused that day. I didn't answer right away. Michael, thanks, I'm fine. Just working, getting used to it. Sophie, it's good to get used to it. Next time coffee is on me. I caught myself smiling. It had been 3 months since the day I'd gotten my divorce papers at the restaurant. 3 months since I'd seen the picture that redefined everything I believed in. 3 months that should have been a fall into the abyss for me, but instead became something else. I was working as if my life depended on it. In a way, it did. Work was the anchor that kept me from sinking back into self-defeat and useless reflections on the past. The new project turned out to be a success. The ideas I proposed in the first weeks were received with enthusiasm. I felt valued, that I mattered again, that I could move forward. The team was better than I expected. People here didn't waste time on idle conversations, but they weren't withdrawn either. I was not asked unnecessary questions. But every day I felt that I was becoming part of the team. And one evening as I was about to leave, my supervisor, the same man who had interviewed me, came up to me and nodded as if he was considering something. You fit in well, Michael. I'm glad I made the right choice. Thanks, I try to be helpful, I replied, tucking the laptop into my bag. Useful? He grinned and shook his head. You're already producing results, and that's what counts. I have a project that I think you might be interested in. I raised my eyebrows, not expecting to hear such a thing. What are we talking about? I'll tell you later. Are you free tonight? I wondered. Before, I would have just nodded, and then gone home, alone with the silence of the apartment, which still smelled of the past. But this time I remembered the message from Sophie, the one from the morning before, the one I'd never answered. Sophie, it's Friday night. Are you going to work late, or risk spending it in more pleasant company? I looked at the chief and shrugged. I'm at your disposal all day tomorrow, but today I promised to meet a man. He grinned again and clapped me on the shoulder. Good answer. Work and wait. I met Sophie at the same cafe, where we had talked the first time. She was sitting by the window, jiggling her spoon lightly in her cappuccino cup and looking at her phone. As I approached, she looked up, smiled, and tapped her finger on the screen. I was about to remind you that you have a life outside the office. I used to think I had nothing left at all. And now, I looked out the window where car lights were flashing, people were laughing. Someone was in a hurry to go on a date. Someone was just walking down the street with no purpose. Now I'm beginning to realize that not all is lost. Good answer, she said, echoing the words of my boss. We talked about all sorts of things. About work, about plans, about life. About how people find the strength to start over when everything seems lost. I didn't tell her any details about Lauren, and she didn't ask. That's why she was easy to deal with. After a few weeks, I realized that I didn't think about Lauren on a daily basis anymore. There were moments when the memories resurfaced, but they didn't tear me up inside, didn't leave a bitter taste in my mouth. I've moved on, but the past wasn't going to let me go that easily. One evening, as I was about to leave the office, my phone vibrated. I looked at the screen and froze. Lauren, damn name I haven't seen in months. I looked at my phone, expecting her to text or call back, but after a minute it went silent. I put on silent mode and continued packing. After a few minutes, the vibration again. Lauren, Michael, I know you can see my messages. I clenched my teeth, feeling something unpleasant clench in my chest. Lauren, I need to talk to you. It's important. I didn't answer. Lauren, are you really going to ignore me? Yes, that's exactly what I was going to do. I turned my phone off and tossed it in my bag, not allowing myself to even think about what she wanted. I expected Lauren to just disappear when she realized I wasn't answering. I hoped she'd send a few messages, maybe call again, but then realize her time was up. But people like her don't know how to take no for an answer. At first the messages kept coming, but I didn't read them. Lauren, We're adults, Michael. Don't you want to know what I have to say? Lauren, I know I can't get my old life back, but can't we at least get together? Just talk. Lauren, you're not so petty as to ignore me, are you? I stared at those words and felt irritation building up inside. Did she call it petty? No, Lauren, it's not pettiness. It's the boundaries I've finally learned to set. I blocked her number and decided that was the end of it. But the next day she came to my work. I was leaving the office a little later than usual when I saw her. Lauren stood at the entrance to the building, arms crossed over her chest, looking directly at me. Her black coat emphasized her figure. Her long dark hair was neatly styled, and her lips were touched with a slight half-smile that read confidence. She clearly had no doubt that I'd fit right in. I didn't seem to notice her, but she took a step forward on her own. I didn't think you'd avoid me, Michael. I'm not avoiding. I just don't see the point in talking. You've always been too stubborn, and you're overconfident. Neither of us have changed, have we? In case you haven't noticed, I'm not really interested in talking to you. She sighed, taking a step closer, as if trying to shorten the distance. Look, I don't want to make a scene. She faltered a little, searching for words, but there was no remorse in her voice. I just want to talk. Go ahead. Michael, I don't feel well. I looked at her and suddenly realized she was telling the truth. I asked. It didn't go the way I thought it would. I didn't mean to hurt you, really. I'm just confused. Confused? You're not confused, Lauren. You planned ahead. She frowned slightly, but didn't argue. I was wrong. Wrong. I folded my arms across my chest and looked at her carefully. Mistakes are when you buy the wrong kind of coffee, and you betrayed the man who'd been there for you for 10 years. She looked away, but quickly looked at me again. We were unhappy, Michael. You were unhappy. But instead of talking, you chose betrayal and humiliation. She bit her lip as if she didn't know what to say. I don't expect you to forgive me, she finally said, but maybe we could at least try to understand each other. She still thought she could convince me. She still hoped that I doubted her, that there was still a part of me that wanted her back. No, Lauren, I said calmly. We have nothing to talk about. I turned around and headed for the car without even looking at her. As I got into the car, the phone vibrated again. Message from Sophie. Are you still in the office? If so, I have a better idea. I smiled and typed a reply. Michael, I'm on my way out. Where do you want to meet? Sophie was waiting for me at the corner bar. She called the perfect place to reboot after a hard day. I parked near the entrance, paused for a second, looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror, and suddenly realized I felt calm. I faced Lauren, heard her excuses, saw the self-pity in her eyes, but felt nothing. No anger, no hate, no desire to prove to her how wrong she was. She was no longer a part of my life, and that made it easier to breathe. When I walked into the bar, Sophie was already sitting behind the bar, lightly tapping her finger on her whiskey glass. You're amazingly punctual, Michael, she said, raising her eyes to me. I sat down next to him, ordered myself a drink and grinned. It's a good habit. I don't like to keep people waiting. I hope you didn't rush me straight from the office. I took a sip of whiskey, felt the alcohol spill warmth inside, and shrugged. No, there was another unplanned conversation. She looked at me carefully, and I realized that she had a clue what this was about. Lauren, she came to my work, said things didn't work out the way she thought they would, wanted us to try to understand each other. And what did you say to her? That we have nothing more to talk about. Good answer. You think so? I think you finally really put it behind you. I nodded, realizing she was right. We talked for a long time, discussing everything but the past, which I didn't want to touch anymore. I didn't realize the time had passed until the bartender announced that he was closing up soon. It was already dark outside, the air filled with a slight chill. Can I give you a ride? I asked as we stepped onto the sidewalk. Sophie glanced at me, bit her lip a little, as if thinking, and then shook her head. I only live 2 blocks away. It'll do you good to walk. I nodded, but was in no hurry to leave. Thank you for writing to me. She tilted her head slightly, looking at me intently, and you didn't answer right away. It was a lot to think about. Sophie smiled and suddenly took a step closer. I think it's time for you to stop thinking. I didn't argue. The work was going better than I could have expected. The project my manager was talking about was a serious one, launching a new platform in which several large companies were investing. I was given more responsibility than I had bargained for, but I was not afraid. I felt like I was back in the game. No more days of sitting in my apartment, staring at the wall, not knowing what to do next. No more remembering Lauren, No more wondering. No more replaying the scene from the restaurant in my head. It was all in the past. But she wasn't going to disappear completely. One evening I got a call from one of my old friends. "Michael, do you know what's going on with Lauren?" I didn't understand what he was talking about at first, but then I heard something like sympathy in his voice. "No, I'm not interested in her life. I think you'll be interested to know." He paused, then added, "She broke up with that guy, and it sounds like things are pretty bad for her right now." "So what?" "She seems to regret what she did. Her problems are none of my business. Just thought you might be interested." "Thank you, but no." I ended the call, tossed the phone on my desk, and went back to work. That was the last time anyone mentioned Lauren in a conversation with me, and that was good enough for me. After a few months, I finally got a foothold in the company. The work was going so well that I was offered a partnership in a project. I realized that I was no longer living in memories, looking back and searching for reasons in the past. Sophie became part of my life as naturally as I became part of hers. We took our time, didn't put labels, didn't try to fit into any patterns. We were just there for each other. One evening we sat on the roof of her house, drinking wine and watching the city sink into the bustle of night. "Did you ever think you'd end up here?" she asked, sliding her fingers over the rim of the glass. "A few months ago, I wasn't sure I was going to get out of this at all." Sophie looked at me and said calmly but confidently, "I was sure." I didn't notice the message right away, because I was fully immersed in work that day. The project launch was approaching, and everyone in the office was working at maximum capacity. It seemed to me that this was exactly what I wanted, total concentration that left no room for unnecessary thoughts. But in the evening, as I was about to leave, the phone vibrated again. I glanced at the screen. "Lauren." "Michael, if you still hate me, I understand. If you don't care, I get that too. But if anything inside of you can just hear me, please read this message to the end." I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and looked out the window, where the city was beginning to sink into the evening bustle. "Lauren, you probably already know that things have gone wrong for me. I was alone. I lost almost everything I believed in. And now that I have nowhere to go, I've started to realize how much I've destroyed with my own hands." I didn't know why I was even reading this. Maybe because it was the last unanswered question of my life. "Lauren, I was a fool, Michael. I thought I could find something better, something brighter, something fresh. And it turned out I'd just broken the only thing that really mattered." I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for forgiveness, because I know it's not enough. I just want to tell you that you were the best thing that ever happened to me, and that I now live with the realization that I destroyed it with my own hands. I read the message to the end and put the phone on the table without answering, just grabbed his jacket, turned off the office light, and walked out of the office without looking back. The past is left where it belongs. When I got into the car, it was starting to get dark outside. The city continued to live its life, people rushing about, laughing, talking, kissing at intersections. I felt the slight vibration of my phone in my pocket. A message from Sophie. "Friday night. Are you going to work late, or do you have better ideas?" I smiled, looked at the screen, and didn't hesitate to type an answer. "Michael, I'm on my way. Where do you want to meet?" Life went on, and this time, without a past that no longer had power over me. Now a question for you. Why do you think Lauren decided to text Michael at the end? Should he have replied to her? Or was it right to ignore it? What would you have done if you were him? Write your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. If you like the story, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm show my content more often. If you are new to the channel, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep making more stories for you.